Now, let's see. Where is that makeup brush? Where is it? Oh, there it is. Alright, that's one thing found. Now, let's see. Okay, there we go. There's the shop vac. Don't know why we got TV cable on top of it. Perfect. Let's get this puppy out. Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. Why do I need the makeup brush? And the shop vac? Well, I want to get something ship-shape before I show it to you guys. But don't worry, I'm not going to make you listen to the howling banshee that is my shop vac. Back in a few minutes. Firstly, this is the box top from my kit. The Scalemates website gives 1986 as the first release of this kit under the Matchbox banner. However, I'm certain there must have been at least one release prior to that. How can I be so certain? I had wanted this kit since I was about 12, and can remember walking 3 miles uphill through 3 feet of snow to the Canucks store in CFB Petawawa and seeing this kit on their shelves and thinking how cool it would be to build it. Now, I moved from Petawawa to Montreal in 1984, so there had to be at least one release before 1986. That minor controversy aside, I did not think much about the kit until the late 90s, when I was working at Bruffdale Hobbies, and while talking to a customer mentioned how I always thought the kit was cool. Now, this customer was also familiar with the kit and proceeded to trash it, basically saying it was totally inaccurate for a Canadian Corvette. My response was to shrug and move on to other things. Fast forward to the year 2000, and Revell, having bought out all of Matchbox's molds, released the Snowberry again. We had an example arrive in the shop around the same time I discovered this book in a local bookstore, and I bought a copy. Now, this is a super interesting book, and tells you just about everything you could ever want to know about the Corvettes of the Royal Canadian Navy. But the most important thing you learn is that by the end of the Second World War, there was no such thing as a standard Canadian Corvette. The Matchbox kit does in fact closely resemble the Snowberry after it was rebuilt in Charleston, North Carolina for the Royal Navy in 1942. It was originally built in Lauson, Quebec, and was one of 10 Corvettes built in Canada for Royal Navy in the hopes that they could be traded for a smaller number of tribal-class destroyers. Now, this barter scheme came to naught, and when the 10 Corvettes arrived in Britain, they were promptly loaned back to the Canadian Navy. However, as the British-owned ships, they received updated equipment and modernizations far sooner than the Canadian-owned ships. Now let's take a tour of my Snowberry. I got this kit around the end of 2000, and started it in 2001, but I did not get too far. I restarted it in 2010, and took about 6 months to complete it. This kit did not have all the extra goodies that were included in the 2012 release of the kit. That release had laser-cut wooden decking and photo etch parts. I did, however, use model ship planking to put a wooden deck on my model. I've seen reviews on YouTube extolling the awesome detail in this kit, and there is a lot of detail. The problem is it's not very fine. Heavy and crude are words that come to mind. However, with a little work, the detail can be improved. I'll call out some of the things I did to my model as we get to them. So let's start our tour at the bow. Matchbox does give you some really nice chains, and they give you ropes to put on the various pulleys and things. And as you look down on the deck, you can see that it is in fact wooden planking. Now, the plank detail that comes in the kit without any of the laser etch parts is raised panel lines, and they are really raised. They really jump out at you. Now, one of the first things I had a problem with was up on the bridge. You can see on the bridge there are 2 oerlikons. And unfortunately, I don't have a before picture of the way that Matchbox originally designed these parts, but they completely misunderstood the curved parts you see here. And they had kind of a weird semicircle that went all the way across the back of the gun. What those semicircles are, in fact, is where the gunner would rest his shoulders, and that would put his head in the right place to use the gun sights. The gun sights came from as surplus items from various different models, and they were photo etched. I was lucky to have those on hand. The big drums that you see on the sides of the gun, that's what the ammunition case for an Oerlikon looks like. And once again, the matchbox part really didn't resemble anything that was really part of an Oerlikon. One other change I made to the bridge concerning those Oerlikons was there should be a circular platform going around the outside of the gun, and those were scratch built and added. And then as we look at the searchlights and the signal light, the lenses that they gave you couldn't even fit inside the casings. So I ended up making my own lenses using, I don't think it was white glue. I think I used a commercial product for making windows in airliners and things like that. The signal lamp, that's that one right there, it's pretty much completely scratch built. And the handles on the back sides, I installed those as well. As we look at the side of the ship, Matchbox and Revell gave you windows or portholes, but the transparencies were so poorly molded that there was basically an air bubble in half of them, and they weren't even really flat. So I pretty much decided to install them and use putty to make sure that they were smooth and flat, and then I painted them flat black. And from the outside of a ship, that's what a porthole is going to look like, is flat black, or not flat black, I should say gloss black. Now, as we look at the lifeboats, now as my dad, an old Navy hand, would say, there really should be a cover on the lifeboat. However, I just decided not to put the cover on. Well, I didn't have one to put on anyway. But the pulleys came from a Revell sailing ship, and then I coiled up the rope inside. Now, the kit does give you, I think, 3 or 4 different names that you can put on them, all of which were basically appropriate for this ship. As we move down, you can see the depth charge throwers. Those are these here, and they're basically mortars that fired the depth charges into the air and to either side of the ship. I think that's a better view right there. And these cranes were to pick up the heavy depth charges and put them in there. So once again, I added some pulleys and some rope. Now this structure here with the windows, those are the skylights for the engine room. And I think if I was doing the kit again, I think I probably would drill those out, and I would probably do a representation of the actual engine in there. Although, who knows, it may be a total waste of time. Now here you can see the ventilators. Now these things actually could be rotated so that as the ship was in motion, they could either point forward into the wind, or if there was a crosswind, they could all be pointed towards whichever way the wind was blowing. And the idea was that would tend to funnel the wind into the ship to help ventilate it. Now, I'll flash up a picture from the side of the Revell box so you can see what the parts look like before you thin them out. And basically I used an X-Acto knife blade to thin out the edges to make it look like it was sheet metal. Because even if the sheet metal was 1/8 of an inch thick or even 1/4 of an inch thick, in 1/72 scale, that's pretty much razor edged. So that was an improvement I made there. The 2-pounder pom-pom anti-aircraft gun, it had a sight added, and it also had an adjustment wheel down below added, among some other surface details that I could see from photographs. And if you look right there, that's one of the many voice pipes that are found on the ship. Now, all of those were molded closed. So every single one of those was hollowed out to represent the open tube that they would be. Now here are the stern racks for the depth charges that they would just drop right off the back. And those were basically built without too many changes. The only thing that you'll find if you ever do build this model is that all the depth charges require an awful lot of cleanup before you can use them. These are the twin Lewis gun mounts that could be swung to either side of the ship. Now, as they're molded, they're actually about 2.5 feet off the ground, and there'd be no way that a crewman could use them. And they also didn't have a whole lot of detail. I added the firing handles at the back, as well as the magazines on top. Now, coming around the other side of the ship, we can see probably one of the most effective weapons that the Corvettes had, and that was the Hedgehog. Now, each of these was a bomb that would be fired in the air, and they would only explode if they made contact with the submarine. However, as compact as it looks here, they could cover an area about the size of a football field. Now, Revell's interpretation of the Hedgehog certainly left a lot to be desired. I'll flash up a picture from the side of the box. What you see here is patterned after pictures that I was able to glean off the internet. And the Hedgehog, in its pre-firing condition, as you see here, all of the bombs should be at a slightly different angle. And that's what I hopefully managed to accomplish here. One thing that I'm not happy with is the decal for their mascot on the side of the gun housing, the duck, chicken? Not quite sure what that is. I'm not really happy with the way that looks, and one of these days I might finally get around to either painting it out or perhaps adding some detail. The rigging is a mixture of the string and twine that Revell gives you and some of my favorite material, Lycra, which is a lot finer. And here's an overview of the port side of the ship. Now, I don't want anyone to get too upset over my criticism of some of the detail parts of this kit. You can build it and get a decent model using those parts. It's just, as I said, they lack a certain amount of fineness of detail. And if you didn't do the research, you probably wouldn't realize that the Oerlikons and the Lewis guns aren't really how they should look. It would be interesting to see how the detail of Revell's new version of the Snowberry in 1/144th scale compares in terms of detail and fidelity compared to this, seeing as it's only half the size. But it's going to benefit from really up-to-date tooling. And a lot of the kits that Revell has done recently are really, really top-notch. I wouldn't be surprised if the parts count for their new ship, even at half the scale, comes close to the parts count for this. So I hope you enjoyed the look at my version of the HMS Snowberry. There's a few things I would probably do a little bit differently, and I know that a couple of my handrails have broken off. It's funny how just sitting on a shelf, a model can accrue wear and tear. But until next time, thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and keep on modeling.